Summer, 1935. A little girl with blonde curls stands on a front porch in Los Angeles. She's 7 years old. She's clutching a small bag with everything she owns. A woman she's never met before opens the door. This is the fifth home in 2 years. The woman looks down at her with cold eyes and says 3 words. "Don't touch anything?" The girl nods. She's learned not to cry. Crying makes it worse. Her name is Norma Jeane. You know her as Marilyn Monroe. By the time she turned 16, she had lived in 12 different foster homes, 12 families, 12 chances at belonging, and 12 times she was told she didn't. For decades, nobody talked about what happened in those homes. The families stayed silent. Marilyn herself rarely spoke of it. In Hollywood, they buried it under the glamour, the sex appeal, the legend. But one family finally broke their silence. And what they revealed changes everything we thought we knew about the most famous woman in the world. Here is the story. Los Angeles in the 1930s. The Great Depression has its grip around America's throat. Families are starving, children are abandoned. And in the shadow of Hollywood's golden age, thousands of unwanted kids are shuffled through a broken foster system that doesn't have the money or the compassion to care. Norma Jeane Mortensen was born into this darkness on June 1st, 1926. Her mother, Gladys, was a film cutter at Consolidated Film Industries. Beautiful, fragile, mentally unstable. She had 2 children before Norma Jeane, both taken away and given to the father she divorced. Norma Jeane's father, he abandoned them before she was born. Gladys was alone, working long hours, barely surviving. She couldn't raise a baby. She didn't know how. So she made a choice that would define her daughter's entire life. She placed Norma Jeane with foster families, not temporarily, not for a few months, for years. The child would live with strangers while Gladys worked and struggled with her deteriorating mental health. And when one family didn't work out, there would be another, and another, and another. Imagine being that child. Imagine never knowing which house is home, never knowing which bed is yours, never knowing if the people feeding you today will want you tomorrow. Every time you start to feel safe, you're ripped away and handed to strangers. Every time you dare to love someone, they give you back. That was Marilyn Monroe's childhood. Not glamour, not fame, not love, survival. But here's what nobody knew. Here's what Hollywood never talked about. Here's what Marilyn herself could barely speak about even decades later when she became the biggest star on the planet. Some of those homes weren't just cold. They weren't just neglectful. They were cruel. And one family, the Bolenders, held secrets about little Norma Jeane that would stay buried for over 50 years. They were her first foster family, the ones who shaped her earliest memories, the ones who had her the longest. And in 1989, long after Marilyn's death, one of them finally spoke. What they revealed was heartbreaking, and it explained everything. Ida and Wayne Bolender took in Norma Jeane when she was just 16 days old. 16 days. A newborn baby girl placed into the hands of strangers because her mother couldn't cope. The Bolenders lived in Hawthorne, California, a working-class neighborhood where the houses were small and the yards were dusty. Ida Bolender was a devout Christian. I mean devout. The kind of faith that saw sin in everything. The kind that believed children were born wicked and needed discipline to be saved. Wayne, her husband, was quieter, compliant, a man who let his wife run the household with an iron fist wrapped in scripture. They made money by taking in foster children. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about giving unwanted babies a chance at family. It was income. The state paid them, and the Bolenders needed the money. Norma Jeane lived with them for 7 years. 7 years. That's longer than most kids stay in any one home. On paper, it looked stable. But behind closed doors, something else was happening. Ida Bolender didn't believe in affection. She believed in discipline, rigidity, control. Norma Jeane was fed, clothed, kept clean, but she wasn't hugged. She wasn't comforted. She wasn't told she was loved. Ida saw her as a duty, not a daughter. And worse, Ida believed the child was tainted. Her mother was unstable. Her father was gone. In Ida's eyes, Norma Jeane carried the stain of sin. The little girl learned early that she was unwanted. She would sit by the window and watch other children play with their mothers. She would see them laugh, hug, run into open arms. And she would wonder what was wrong with her. Why didn't she have that? Why didn't anyone want her? Her real mother, Gladys, would visit occasionally. Sporadic visits that felt more like a stranger stopping by than a mother checking on her daughter. Norma Jeane would light up when she saw her, desperate for connection, desperate for love. But Gladys was distant, uncomfortable, battling her own demons. She couldn't give what she didn't have. And then Gladys would leave again, and Norma Jeane would watch her walk away, wondering if this time she'd ever come back. But the Bolender household wasn't just cold. There were darker moments, moments that Marilyn would later describe in fragments, in therapy sessions, in late-night conversations with people she trusted. She spoke of being punished for things she didn't understand, of being told she was bad, sinful, wrong. She spoke of fear, of loneliness so deep it felt like drowning, of lying in bed at night in a house full of people and feeling completely, utterly alone. Quick question: have you ever felt invisible? Like you're surrounded by people but nobody actually sees you? Like you could disappear and it wouldn't matter? That's the kind of loneliness that doesn't just hurt. It changes you. It hollows you out. Let us know in the comments if you've ever felt that way. By the time Norma Jeane was 7, Gladys tried something new. She tried to take her daughter back. She rented a house. She brought Norma Jeane home. For a brief, shining moment, the little girl thought maybe, finally, she had a mother. It lasted less than a year. Gladys's mental health collapsed. She had a breakdown. A complete psychotic break. She was institutionalized, diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. And just like that, Norma Jeane was alone again, ripped from the one thing she wanted most and thrown back into the system. But this time, it was worse, because now she knew what it felt like to almost have a mother, and losing that was a wound that never healed. After Gladys was institutionalized, Norma Jeane became a ward of the state. She was passed around like unwanted cargo. 12 different foster homes by the time she was 16. 12. Let that sink in. 12 families. 12 times she had to walk into a stranger's house and pretend it was home. 12 times she had to learn new rules, new faces, new ways to stay small and quiet so she wouldn't be sent away. Some homes were just indifferent. She was fed. She had a bed. But she was invisible. A ghost child moving through rooms where nobody cared if she existed. Other homes were worse. She would later speak carefully, hesitantly, about abuse. Not always physical, but emotional, psychological. The kind that tells a child she's worthless. The kind that makes her believe she's unlovable. And in some cases, there were darker insinuations, moments she couldn't fully articulate, memories that traumatized her so deeply she could only speak of them in pieces. She spent time in the Los Angeles Orphans' Home Society, an orphanage. She wasn't an orphan. Her mother was alive, just institutionalized. But that didn't matter. She was unwanted, so she was warehoused. She would later describe standing at the fence of the orphanage, watching families come to adopt children, watching them choose other kids, watching them walk away, holding hands with someone else's child. And she would wonder, every single time, why not her? What was wrong with her? For decades, nobody talked. The families who took her in, the ones who sent her away, the ones who witnessed her pain, they stayed silent. Marilyn became the biggest star in the world, and still, they said nothing. Why? Because some secrets are easier to bury. Because admitting you treated a child with cruelty when that child becomes an icon is a stain you can't wash off. Because Hollywood didn't want to hear about the broken little girl behind the blonde bombshell. But years earlier, something happened that explains everything. In one of those homes, there was a man, a boarder, someone renting a room. Marilyn would later speak about him in therapy, in guarded conversations. She described something that happened, something she couldn't fully name, something that made her feel ashamed, violated, confused. She was a child. She didn't have the words. She didn't have the power. And when she tried to tell the foster mother, she wasn't believed. She was called a liar, a troublemaker. She was punished. And then she was sent to another home, because that's what happened to inconvenient children. They got moved. In 1989, 27 years after Marilyn Monroe's death, a member of the Bolender family finally spoke. They gave an interview, a rare, detailed account of what it was like to have Norma Jeane in their home for those crucial early years, and what they revealed was both heartbreaking and infuriating. They admitted that Ida Bolender was rigid, cold, unaffectionate. They confirmed that the household was ruled by strict religious discipline, that Norma Jeane was treated more like a boarder than a daughter. They acknowledged that the child was desperate for love and received none. But here's what shocked people. Here's what made the world finally understand the depth of Marilyn's pain. They revealed that even as a toddler, Norma Jeane would beg for affection. She would reach out her little arms to be held. She would cry for comfort. And Ida would refuse. Ida believed that showing affection would spoil the child, make her weak, make her sinful. So she withheld it, deliberately. This wasn't neglect born of ignorance. This was calculated emotional deprivation. The family member described watching little Norma Jeane stand at the window for hours, waiting for her mother to visit. And when Gladys didn't come, the child would cry silently, trying not to disturb anyone, trying not to be a problem. They described how Norma Jeane was obsessed with movies, how she would escape into fantasy, into images of beautiful actresses on the screen, and dream of being someone else, someone loved, someone wanted. And they revealed something even darker, that even after Marilyn became famous, after she became Marilyn Monroe, Ida Bolender never expressed pride, never reached out, never acknowledged the little girl she raised. What would you have done in that moment? If you had raised a child who became the most famous woman in the world, but you knew you had broken her, would you stay silent? Or would you seek forgiveness? Comment below what you think is the right thing to do. Marilyn Monroe spent her entire life searching for the love she never received as a child. She married 3 times, desperately seeking stability. She clung to men who couldn't or wouldn't give her what she needed. She surrounded herself with people, terrified of being alone but never truly feeling connected. She would show up late to sets, not because she was a diva, but because she was paralyzed by fear. Fear of being rejected, fear of not being good enough, fear of being sent away again. She overdosed on pills multiple times, not always intentionally, but because the pain of her childhood never left her. The loneliness never left her. In one of her last interviews, she said something haunting. I never quite felt like I belonged anywhere. Not in any of the houses I lived in. Not in Hollywood. Not even in my own skin. That's what 12 foster homes do to a child. They teach you that love is conditional, that you're disposable, that no place is home. And Marilyn Monroe, the woman the world desired, the woman millions envied, spent her entire life feeling like that little girl on the porch, clutching a bag, waiting to be sent away. When Marilyn Monroe died on August 5, 1962, at just 36 years old, the world mourned. But Hollywood moved on. Her films kept making money. Her image kept selling products. And the truth about her childhood stayed buried until the Bolender family spoke. Their revelation opened a floodgate. Other people who knew Norma Jeane started talking, social workers who had handled her case, teachers who remembered the quiet, withdrawn little girl, neighbors who witnessed the coldness of the Bolender household, and a picture emerged. A picture of systemic failure, of a foster care system that saw children as numbers, not humans, of families who took in kids for money, not love, of a society that looked the away when inconvenient children suffered. But here's the question nobody wanted to ask. Why was this kept secret for so long? Because Marilyn Monroe's image was worth more as a fantasy than as a tragedy. Hollywood needed the bombshell, the sex symbol, the blonde goddess. They didn't want the broken foster kid, they didn't want the reality of abuse and neglect and abandonment, so they buried it. And the families who hurt her stayed silent, because speaking up would mean admitting complicity. But the truth has a way of surfacing, and when it did, it changed everything. People started to understand that Marilyn's struggles with mental health, her dependency on pills, her desperate need for validation, it wasn't vanity, it wasn't weakness, it was survival. She was a deeply traumatized woman trying to function in a world that demanded she be perfect while giving her no tools to heal. Fast forward to today. We talk about childhood trauma differently now. We understand attachment disorders. We understand complex PTSD. We understand that what happens to you as a child shapes everything that comes after. Marilyn Monroe didn't have that language. She didn't have trauma-informed therapy. She didn't have a society that believed survivors. She had pills and fame and loneliness, and ultimately, it killed her. Some believe her death was accidental, an overdose born of desperation and pain. Others say it was calculated, that she simply couldn't carry the weight anymore. Which theory makes sense to you? Was it tragedy or inevitability? Let us know in the comments. But here's what we know for certain. Marilyn Monroe was failed by her mother, by the foster system, by the 12 families who took her in and sent her away, by Hollywood, by a society that consumed her image but refused to see her humanity. And when the Bolender family finally spoke, decades too late, it wasn't redemption, it was confession. Marilyn Monroe once said, "I don't want to make money. I just want to be wonderful." She didn't want wealth. She didn't want fame for fame's sake. She wanted to be loved, to be valued, to matter. She wanted what every child in 12 foster homes is denied, the certainty that someone, somewhere, thinks you're wonderful just because you exist. She never got that. Instead, she became an icon, a symbol, a fantasy for millions. But inside, she was still that little girl standing on the porch, waiting for someone to choose her. The revelation from the Bolender family didn't change Marilyn's fate. She was already gone. But it changed how we see her. It stripped away the manufactured glamour and revealed the raw, aching humanity underneath. She wasn't weak. She wasn't broken. She was surviving the unsurvivable. And maybe that's her real legacy. Not the films, not the photos, not the breathless voice and the platinum hair. Maybe it's this. She endured 12 foster homes and still became Marilyn Monroe. She carried unimaginable pain and still gave the world beauty. She was abandoned over and still tried every single day to be wonderful. That takes a kind of strength most people will never understand. So here is the question for you. If you could go back in time and tell little Norma Jeane one thing, knowing everything that would happen to her, what would you say? Would you tell her to keep fighting? Would you warn her? Would you just hold her and tell her she's enough? Let us know in the comments. And let us know which untold story we should cover next. The hidden truth about James Dean's last days, or the secret Elizabeth Taylor kept until her death? Comment below. Marilyn Monroe was failed by 12 families, but she gave the world something they never gave her: grace. And unfortunately, they don't make women like Marilyn Monroe anymore.